Imagine the sky suddenly turns pitch black and it stays that way for 10 straight years. 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano erupted and pushed humanity to the absolute brink of total extinction. Temperatures plunged instantly, global plants died off, and our ancestors were left completely in the dark. In fact, genetic records show the entire global human population collapsed down to just a few thousand people. So how on earth did a hairless, weak ape like us survive 1,000 years of endless winter? The answer involves disgusting survival hacks, living inside animal bones, and eating stuff you wouldn't touch on a dare. First off, when traditional hunting failed because all the deer froze to death, humans turned to giant megafauna. Taking down a 5-ton woolly mammoth wasn't about strength. It was pure psychological warfare. Hunter teams would chase a mammoth for days straight, forcing it into deep snowbanks until it was completely exhausted. Once down, every single millimeter of the beast was salvaged for survival. Because wood was virtually impossible to find on the frozen tundra, humans built their houses out of mammoth ribs. They stretched heavy animal hides over the bone frames and weighed down the edges with heavy skull rocks. These bone huts were so windproof that they stayed surprisingly warm inside even during minus 40-degree blizzards. Inside the hut, however, lay a major problem. How do you light up a room when there's no wood to burn? Enter the grossest invention of prehistoric times, the bone marrow lamp. Humans cracked open animal bones, scooped out the thick fat, and burned woven moss as a wick. It smelled horrific, but it burned slow, gave off intense heat, and lit up the dark ice caves. Next came the struggle for actual nutrition. Standard meat wasn't enough because zero fat meant starvation. If you only eat lean meat without fat in sub-zero weather, your body actually burns more energy digesting it than it gets back. So ancient humans developed a bizarre preference. They ate the fatty brain tissue and raw organ meats first. To get those essential calories, hunter-gatherers turned bone marrow into a nutrient-dense, spreadable paste. They would crack giant femur bones open using massive rocks just to suck out every single drop of raw fat. It was essentially the world's very first high-calorie survival energy bar. In fact, without this extreme fat consumption, early human brains would have literally starved and shrunk. But food was only half the battle. The freezing cold air was constantly trying to kill them within minutes. Loose fur blankets weren't enough anymore. If cold air reached their skin, frostbite was instantaneous. That is when one single invention changed the fate of humanity forever. The bone sewing needle. It sounds simple, but a needle allowed humans to sew tight, multi-layered, air-proof winter suits. They used dried animal tendons as ultra-strong thread that wouldn't snap in freezing temperatures. Neanderthals, on the other hand, never mastered tailored clothing. They just wrapped loose furs around themselves. This tiny technology gap gave Homo sapiens a massive advantage in surviving the deep freeze. They created fur boots lined with dried grass that worked like high-tech modern thermal insulation. If your feet froze, you couldn't hunt, and if you couldn't hunt, your whole tribe died. To prevent snow blindness from staring at endless white landscapes, they invented the world's first sunglasses. By carving narrow horizontal slits into pieces of bone or wood, they blocked out the blinding sun glare. It restricted their vision slightly but kept them from going totally blind while tracking game on the ice. Still, the physical strain of endless winter took a horrifying toll on the human body. Enamel on fossilized teeth shows that children suffered through severe periods of seasonal famine every single year. Yet somehow, through sheer force of will and extreme teamwork, human bands kept pushing forward. And then, after a long 1,000 years of ice and ash, the global temperatures finally started to shift. As the skies slowly cleared, humans faced another massive hurdle: maintaining fire in a world soaked in ice. If a band's central ember went out during a storm, it meant almost certain death for everyone within days. So they invented mobile ember carriers, hollowed horn containers packed with slow-burning charcoal and fungus. This allowed them to walk for days through blizzards while keeping a live spark smoldering safely inside their pocket. To feed these fires, they relied on dry birch polypore fungus, the ultimate prehistoric fire starter. Even if dropped in freezing water, this mushroom could catch a spark and ignite instantly. Inside the bone huts, another vital survival mechanism was taking shape: intense storytelling. Without written maps, oral traditions passed down life-saving information about where water stayed liquid. Tales of dangerous beast territories and hidden mountain passes were memorized through the rhythmic songs. Groups that shared knowledge survived. Groups that isolated themselves died off in the cold. They also began trading rare resources like flint and warm furs across hundreds of frozen miles. Archaeologists have found seashells hundreds of miles inland, proving massive prehistoric trade networks existed. This hyper-cooperation was the exact secret weapon that allowed Homo sapiens to outcompete every other hominid. When the ice finally retreated 10,000 years later, humanity didn't just survive, we exploded across the planet. The genetic bottleneck from that endless winter forged the resilient, creative humans we are today. Every single person alive today is descended from those few thousand tough survivors in bone huts. So the next time you complain about a chilly winter morning, remember what your ancestors endured. They ate raw marrow, slept inside mammoth skulls, and wore bone goggles just so you could watch YouTube. If you found these prehistoric survival hacks mind-blowing, hit that subscribe button right now. Because next time, we're uncovering the grossest hygiene secrets of the ancient world. See you then. To stay alive during a 1,000-year winter, tracking meat was only half the problem. You had to actually kill it without getting stomped. Standard wooden spears snapped instantly against thick, woolly hides and ice-crusted muscle. So Ice Age hunters engineered the ultimate prehistoric sniper weapon, the atlatl spear thrower. By extending the human arm's leverage, an atlatl launched a dart at over 90 miles per hour. That kind of kinetic force could punch clean through heavy hide, bone, and frozen fat in a single second. When hunting was impossible due to whiteout blizzards, early humans turned to another extreme trick: frozen food storage. They sunk entire meat carcasses down into deep, freezing bog lakes where bacteria couldn't grow. Months later, during a total blizzard, they would dive through the ice and pull out perfectly preserved meat. Without these natural deep freezers, entire tribes would have starved to death during 4-month-long ice storms. Even mental health had to be managed. Stuck inside dark bone huts for months, cabin fever was a deadly threat. To keep spirits up and maintain social order, they carved intricate art out of mammoth ivory and soft stone. Ancient flutes made from vulture bones prove that music echoed through the ice caves tens of thousands of years ago. Music wasn't just entertainment. It kept human minds grounded, united, and sane in the dark. And when spring finally began to peek through after a 10-century freeze, humans were unstoppable. They had mastered heat, clothing, weapons, food preservation, and global teamwork under the worst conditions ever. The Ice Age didn't destroy humanity. It forced us to become the master species of planet Earth. So every time you flip on a heater or wear a warm winter jacket, give a quiet thanks to those ancient pioneers. They froze so that we could thrive. If you want to master more incredible ancient human secrets, smash that like button and hit subscribe to Drawn. Drop a comment below with the weirdest survival trick you learned today, and I'll see you in the next mystery.